You know, usually when we talk about willpower, we picture this like epic solitary battle. It's 6 in the morning, your alarm is just screaming at you, and it's just you versus the snooze button.
Right, like a pure test of moral strength.
Exactly. You either have the grit to get out of bed or you just don't. It's clean, it's binary, and I mean, honestly, it's a little exhausting.
Oh, it's totally exhausting because
Yeah.
society treats it almost like a genetic lottery. You're supposedly either born a highly disciplined machine, destined for greatness, or you're doomed to a life of procrastination and half-finished projects.
But then you step into the modern science of motivation, and suddenly that whole binary pass or fail willpower test is completely thrown out the window. Welcome to today's deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. Our mission today is to really unpack the actual science of self-control. We're going to figure out why we procrastinate, why we fail, and how we can actually stick to our goals without just, gritting our teeth until our jaws hurt.
And to do this, we are drawing from an incredibly rich source today. It's an extensive, deeply analytical conversation between a prominent neurobiologist and Dr. Kentaro Fujita, who is a leading expert in the psychology of self-control and motivation.
Yeah, and they completely deconstruct the myths we've all been sold about how the human brain actually handles temptation.
It's fascinating stuff.
So if you are listening to this while actively avoiding a daunting project at work, or maybe feeling guilty about skipping the gym, or just like staring down a sink full of dishes you really don't want to wash, stick around.
Definitely stick around.
Because by the end of this deep dive, you are going to view your own daily struggles through a completely different, highly practical lens. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the most famous willpower experiment of all time. We have to talk about the Stanford marshmallow test.
Oh, of course. The classic behavioral setup from the 1960s and 70s.
The ultimate classic.
Right. And for anyone who might not be familiar with the exact mechanics, a researcher basically brings a child into a room, sits them down in front of a single marshmallow, and gives them a choice.
The hardest choice a kid can make.
Exactly. They say, eat this one now, or if you can wait 15 minutes while I leave the room, you get a second marshmallow.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate showdown between a smaller, sooner reward and a larger, later reward.
And the lore around this is absolutely legendary. I mean, the longitudinal data that came out years later supposedly tracked these kids and found that the ones who held out for the second marshmallow had, better grades, higher incomes, better health.
Lower rates of incarceration, even.
Right. It essentially told society that your ability to stare down a sugary treat at age 4 just dictates your entire destiny.
Yeah, but that narrative took a massive hit recently, though.
It really did.
Critics pointed out a major flaw in the original studies, which was socioeconomic status, or SES.
Yeah.
The original kids were largely from well-to-do Stanford families. So when modern researchers tried to replicate the study with a larger, like a way more diverse group of kids, and statistically adjusted for about 30 or 40 different variables.
Like household income and parental education.
Exactly. Income, education, home stability, you name it. When they adjusted for all that, the predictive power of the marshmallow test simply vanished. It looked like the test was a complete illusion created by wealth and privilege.
Wow.
This raises an important question. Was the marshmallow test actually debunked, or did we just interpret the statistical correction incorrectly?
That's the part that really hooked me, because the source material points out a major counter-criticism to that whole debunking narrative.
Right.
When another team of researchers, led by Yuko Munakata, reanalyzed that exact same diverse data set, they didn't just throw in the kitchen sink of 40 random variables. They used what the source calls theory-driven covariates.
Which is a very fancy academic term.
Yeah, exactly. So before we go further, what does a theory-driven covariate actually mean in plain English?
Well, it basically means you only statistically control for variables that actually make psychological sense in the context of the behavior.
Okay.
Throwing 40 variables into a model like a child's shoe size, their exact zip code, and every minor demographic detail can statistically drown out the actual signal.
That makes sense.
Munakata's team argued you should only control for factors that directly impact a child's cognitive framing at that very moment. When they refined the data to only account for those relevant theory-driven variables, the marshmallow test actually did still predict behavioral outcomes later in life.
So the debunking was actually debunked.
Exactly.
But it still brings us back to why socioeconomic status matters so much in the first place. The source material isolates trust as a massive defining variable here.
So trust is huge.
Yeah. If a child doesn't trust the experimenter, eating the marshmallow immediately isn't a failure of willpower. It is the purely rational choice.
It completely rewires the stakes of the game. Like if a child comes from a highly stable environment, waiting 15 minutes for a guaranteed second marshmallow makes logical sense. The adults in their life keep their promises.
Right.
But if a child comes from an unpredictable environment where promised rewards often evaporate,
Mm-hmm.
where people say, oh, I'll bring you a toy tomorrow and never do waiting, is actually a terrible, naive strategy.
It's like an adult being promised a massive year-end bonus by a company that is notoriously shady.
Perfect analogy.
If you know your boss is unreliable, you don't wait for a check that might bounce. You take whatever immediate payout you can get today, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The kids weren't failing a willpower test. They were just protecting themselves from disappointment.
And perhaps the greatest tragedy of the entire marshmallow test discourse is that society fixated entirely on the predictive outcomes and completely missed the actual practical finding of Walter Mischel's original research.
Which was what?
He never intended for self-control to be viewed as an innate genetic talent. He was actually proving it as a taught skill.
See, that part completely blew my mind. The researchers didn't just watch the kids suffer. They actively taught them strategies to delay gratification.
Right. They taught the children to mentally transform the marshmallow. They instructed them to imagine the marshmallows as, like, puffy white clouds.
Oh, wow.
Or, even better, to pretend there was an imaginary picture frame around the marshmallow. Cognitively, this shifts the child's focus away from the hot properties of the object. The sweet smell, the gooey taste, and forces the brain to focus on the cool properties, like its shape and color.
That is wild.
It turns a delicious, real treat into a flat, inedible photograph. And when the children use these cognitive tools, their ability to wait just skyrocketed.
Wait, so if they're just reframing the marshmallow as a picture, they aren't actually using willpower at all. They're just tricking their brains. Is willpower even the right word for this?
Well, the source makes a very sharp distinction between these two terms that we usually just use interchangeably.
Okay, lay it on me.
Willpower is specifically defined as the effortful suppression of an urge. It's you staring directly at the chocolate cake, flexing your mental muscles, and screaming internally, do not eat that.
I know that feeling well.
We all do.
Yeah.
But self-control, on the other hand, is the broader toolbox of behavioral and psychological strategies, like the picture frame trick used to navigate around the urge entirely.
This distinction feels really crucial when we look at the whole debate around ego depletion.
Oh, ego depletion.
Yeah, for years, the dominant theory in pop psychology was that willpower is literally a muscle. If you use it, it gets tired. I remember reading studies where they would have people do incredibly frustrating tasks, like doing everything with their non-dominant hand.
Right, or doing the Stroop task.
Exactly. The one where you have to identify the color of a word, but the word says blue and it's printed in red ink.
Yeah.
The theory was that doing one hard task depletes your willpower reserves, making you fail at the next hard task.
But the depletion effect has actually failed several major multi-lab replication attempts recently. Yeah. The psychologist Veronica Job discovered something incredible that flips this entire theory on its head. She found that whether your willpower gets depleted depends heavily on your lay beliefs.
Hold on. Are you telling me 5 p.m. decision fatigue is just a placebo? Because I'll tell you, if I spend 8 hours making intense decisions at work, I literally feel exhausted.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
It is infinitely harder to choose a salad over a pizza for dinner. If it's just a lay belief, why does every human on Earth feel that fatigue?
Because it feels incredibly real. Your brain is generating the fatigue, but not because it's genuinely out of fuel. Your brain constantly monitors your effort levels, right?
Right.
Job's research shows that if you hold the underlying belief that cognitive labor is a finite resource, that hard work drains you, your brain interprets prolonged effort as a signal to downregulate. It essentially says, warning, reserves are low, deploy the feeling of exhaustion to conserve energy. So you experience real physical depletion.
But if you believe the opposite,
If you hold the belief that doing hard things actually energizes you, that pushing through a complex problem sharpens your mind, your brain interprets that same prolonged effort as a signal to ramp up. It doesn't send the fatigue signal.
that is mind-blowing.
Your narrative about willpower physically dictates whether your brain throttles your energy or sustains it. What's fascinating here is because willpower is driven by these internal narratives rather than a finite tank of glucose, Direct willpower training shows very limited, highly variable success.
Like people trying to force themselves to write left-handed for a week.
Exactly, just to build a mental callus,
Yeah.
hoping it will make them stop procrastinating at work. It rarely translates. The solution to temptation isn't building a bigger willpower muscle to suppress urges.
Right.
The solution is using that broader self-control toolkit so you never have to rely on brute force suppression in the first place.
Let's open up that toolkit then, because the mechanics here are wild. For decades, the old model of self-control told us that we have this hot, animalistic limbic system full of impulsive urges and a cool, rational prefrontal cortex.
The old dual system theory.
Yeah. And the goal was always to cool down the hot system. Take a deep breath, step back, logically remind yourself of your diet. But the source material suggests something totally counterintuitive.
Fighting fire with fire.
Yes. So it's not a fair one-on-one boxing match between me and the chocolate cake. I shouldn't fight fair. I need to bring a whole gang of emotions into the ring to jump the cake.
Neurobiologically, that gang is your prefrontal cortex recruiting high-level emotional networks to overpower the immediate dopamine spike you're anticipating from the cake.
Okay, how does that work?
You can do this using hot negatives. If you are drawn to the cake, you don't rationally say, this exceeds my caloric limit for the day. You imagine a cockroach crawling across the frosting.
Oh, gross.
Or you vividly anticipate the brutal, lethargic sugar crash you are going to feel in 20 minutes. You are using a short-term visceral repulsion to fight a short-term visceral temptation.
That is so effective. And we can bring positive emotions to the fight too, right?
Very effectively. Instead of a sterile, cold goal like, I'm lowering my BMI, you infuse the moment with deep meaning. You activate hot positives.
Like what?
You think, I want to be healthy so I can chase my grandchildren around the yard.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I want to be a living example of vitality for my family. You use powerful, high-order emotions like social belonging or profound love to completely swamp the low-level urge for sugar.
But why is it so incredibly hard to summon those beautiful high-order thoughts in the moment? I mean, the night before, I'm fully committed to the gym. I have all the hot positives lined up. I'm thinking about vitality. But when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., all that logic evaporates, and I just want the blanket.
You are experiencing the distance problem.
The distance problem.
Yeah. Our self-control is highly dependent on psychological distance. When a goal is far away in time, like planning tomorrow's workout, we think about it abstractly. We focus entirely on the desirability of the goal.
The why.
Exactly. We think about the pride, the health benefits, the why. But as the event gets closer, our mental processing shifts from abstract to concrete. We stop thinking about why we want it, and we start hyperfixating on how to do it.
And the how usually involves a lot of immediate friction.
Yeah.
Tying your shoes in the freezing cold, the physical burn in your lungs, lifting the heavy weights.
Exactly.
So at the exact moment I need motivation the most, my brain abandons the abstract why and just complains about the miserable how.
Yes, your brain just narrows in on the discomfort.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source offers a literal cognitive hack to artificially recreate that psychological distance in the moment of struggle. It's called the Batman effect.
I love this study.
It's so cool. Researchers had children do an incredibly frustrating, boring task. But for some of the kids, they gave them a cape and told them to ask themselves, what would Batman do when things got hard? And those kids showed vastly improved self-control.
The mechanism driving that is profound. When you refer to yourself in the third person, or when you simulate the mind of someone else like a hero or a master in your field, you literally shift the activation patterns in your brain.
Really? Just from wearing a cape or asking a question?
Yes, stepping outside of your immediate perspective engages the default mode network and the temporoparietal junction, which helps lower the immediate reactivity of the amygdala.
Oh, wow.
You are silencing your immediate complaining self, which creates enough psychological space to reconnect with the bigger abstract why.
So when I'm staring at a blank spreadsheet and feeling the urge to open social media, instead of thinking, I hate this, I should pause and ask, how would a master analyst tackle this?
Exactly.
It sounds silly, but you're saying it literally rewires the neural approach, cooling down the frustration. But what if the problem isn't a specific temptation? What if the problem is just, well, getting started?
Initiation friction.
Yeah. We live in this hyper-optimization culture where we are sold the idea that we need the perfect morning routine, the perfect ambient lighting, and the ultimate cup of coffee before we can focus.
Which is often just a very sophisticated, socially acceptable excuse to procrastinate.
It totally is.
We've been conditioned to expect our focus and motivation to operate like a light switch.
Mm.
You sit down, you flip the switch, and boom, you are instantly in a state of deep, flawless work. But the brain simply does not work that way. It requires a warm-up period.
Which makes perfect physical sense. You wouldn't walk into a gym, skip stretching, and immediately try to deadlift your absolute maximum weight. You'd tear a muscle. Why do we expect our complex cognitive networks to instantly sprint into deep work?
From a neurobiological standpoint, the brain needs time to fall into what are called attractor states.
Attractor states.
Yeah. When you first sit down to a task, your neural circuits are disorganized. There's a lot of hash, a lot of background noise from whatever you were just doing. The neurons haven't synchronized yet.
That makes sense.
Interestingly, physical movement actually triggers the release of adrenaline, which acts as a neuromodulator to help clear up that signal-to-noise ratio in the brain. But even cognitively, you have to wade through an initial period of friction.
You just have to endure it.
You have to actively permit yourself to do 10 minutes of terrible, distracted, low-quality work before the brain recognizes the pattern, clears the noise, and drops into a focused groove.
And part of that warm-up is learning to tolerate the utterly boring, mundane stuff. There's this incredible anecdote in the source about a highly successful principal investigator at a sleep lab.
Oh, the narcolepsy researcher.
Yes, this is a brilliant scientist who co-discovered the genetic basis for narcolepsy, a massive, textbook-altering scientific breakthrough. Yet, he would regularly come into the lab and stand side by side with the junior technicians doing the most mind-numbing rudimentary tasks, like acid-washing glass cover slips.
That anecdote connects beautifully to the Japanese concept of ikigai, finding purpose, meaning, and even the sacred in the mundane.
I love that.
In a society that worships constant advancement and immediate impact, doing repetitive, simple tasks feels like an agonizing waste of time. But performing those tasks with intention connects you to the broader essence of the work.
Translating that to you, the listener, whether you are doing data entry, sweeping the front steps of a shop, or organizing a chaotic inbox, finding intrinsic value in those boring chop-wood, carry-water tasks is a superpower.
It absolutely is.
Extrinsic rewards like a paycheck, a promotion, or praise from a boss will eventually fade or fluctuate. Intrinsic appreciation for the process itself is the only thing that sustains long-term motivation when the external validation disappears.
Cultivating that intrinsic appreciation builds a resilience that extreme life-hacking optimization simply cannot provide. But this intense focus on consistency brings up another fascinating dilemma highlighted in our source material.
Oh.
The insidious trap of the unbroken streak.
Oh, the Apple Watch dilemma. The source talks about the psychology of hitting a 500-day streak of closing those fitness rings on an Apple Watch. And suddenly, the pattern takes on a terrifying life of its own.
It becomes an obsession.
You find yourself running on a treadmill at 11:30 at night, exhausted, ignoring a mild injury, ignoring your body's desperate need for rest, just so a digital circle closes on your wrist.
This illustrates the classic tension between two fundamental self-control strategies, abstinence and moderation.
Okay, let's break those down.
Abstinence means you never, ever break the rule. You close the rings every single day, or you never eat a single gram of processed sugar. Moderation means you aim for the goal, but allow for occasional, contextual flexibility.
Society almost universally views the person practicing abstinence, the person who refuses to have even a sliver of cake at their own best friend's wedding, as having vastly superior self-control.
Ironically, computationally speaking, abstinence is actually much simpler for the brain.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the choice is entirely pre-decided. You don't have to negotiate with yourself. If it's Monday at 5 p.m., you go to the gym. The neural pathway for the decision is sealed shut. There is zero decision fatigue.
Oh, I see.
Moderation, however, requires constant, active, heavy-lifting self-control. You have to evaluate the context, weigh the variables, and decide if this specific instance warrants a lapse, and then somehow ensure that one lapse doesn't destroy the overall habit.
That sounds exhausting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we live in a culture that worships the extreme, single-minded pursuit of one goal. We lionize athletes like Michael Jordan or obsessive entrepreneurs who sacrificed absolutely everything else in their lives for singular greatness.
For sure. We're taught that true success requires this blind, abstinent single-mindedness.
But biologically and psychologically, humans are built to juggle multiple invisible goals simultaneously.
Exactly. We want to be great at our jobs, but we also want to be present parents, supportive friends, and healthy individuals. We have artistic goals, financial goals, and social goals all running in the background.
Because of that, We cannot afford to apply rigid abstinence to every single domain of our lives. It would cause a systemic collapse.
It's just not sustainable.
You have to consciously decide, is this a domain where I need the rigid simplicity of abstinence? Like perhaps maintaining sobriety, where one lapse destroys the goal entirely. Or is this a domain like studying or exercising, where the flexibility of moderation will prevent burnout and allow me the time to serve my other invisible goals?
Right.
The danger is defaulting to the cultural ideal of rigid extremes and realizing the collateral damage to your life years too late.
So what does this all mean? It means we need to completely discard the old narrative. Self-control isn't a genetic gift you are born with, and willpower isn't a magical muscle that just runs out of juice at 5 p.m.
Not at all.
Self-control is a dynamic, highly personal toolkit. It's about knowing how to create psychological distance by stepping outside of yourself when you're tempted. It's about fighting the fire of bad habits with the hotter fire of your deepest, most visceral values.
Very well said.
It's about giving your brain permission to wade through 10 minutes of noisy friction to warm up. And it's about consciously choosing when a goal requires the simplicity of abstinence versus the heavy lifting of moderation.
Spot on.
To you listening right now,
Thank you.
think about whatever task or goal you are currently avoiding. Which tool are you going to pull from the kit? I was going to fight fire with fire and visualize the absolute worst-case scenario of failing. Are you going to put on your metaphorical Batman cape and ask how someone you deeply admire would handle the friction? Or are you just going to sit down, drop the optimization excuses, and allow yourself 10 minutes of terrible work to warm up?
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the underlying mechanics we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
We just discussed how vital it is to push through mundane tasks, watching the cover slips, chopping the wood to build your intrinsic motivation, and find your ikigai. But look at the trajectory of the world today.
It's changing fast.
We are rapidly outsourcing every boring, repetitive, low-level task to AI and automation. If we successfully eliminate all the mundane friction from our daily lives, are we accidentally robbing ourselves of the very practice grounds we need to build our self-control for the things that truly matter?
Wow, that is a brilliant and slightly terrifying question to end on, because the next time that alarm goes off at 6 a.m., there won't be an algorithm to pull the covers off for you. It's just you and your newly upgraded toolkit. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep experimenting, keep exploring the sources in your own lives, and we'll see you next time.